Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Session 15 recap of Campaign 4 of the Heroes Era. Uh, to start, we ended in the middle or at the very end of a combat. There was a lot of funny tricks going on in some dark tunnels, and a demon that was swiping at us, and a guy in a suit of armor we accidentally gave him before we knew that he was an imposter and not the friend we thought he was. Uh, Most of us were pretty hurt. Desperado, the paladin, was on the brink of death, and he was knocked down by the man in armor, the imposter. And after we all meet up in the tunnel, the demon that was scurrying about left with the man in armor, the imposter, who doppelganger, for simplicity's sake. And we tended to Desperado's wounds, and we gave him a potion, got him back on his feet. We went through to the other chamber that we were trying to get to the entire time. And in this chamber, it was like a 30 by 30 foot room. There was a chest with a pedestal, and there was a demon licking its wounds. It was pretty hurt. We almost killed it, and the doppelganger in the armor was sitting there, kind of like off to the side, not really trying to like be too aggressive against us. And he bartered, and he said, "Hey, if you let me live and help me kill this demon, I'll give you the armor back." And Draco was very against that. He just wanted to kill the man. And I told him if we could get the armor off of him, then kill. And so we went ahead and fought the demon. And by we, I mean Draco just like roundhouse kicked it in the head and like took it out immediately, and it died. And took out all the threat in the room. We went up to the doppelganger, interrogated him thoroughly, tried to get some information out of him. We also gave him a very powerful sword that belonged to a friend of ours that we're trying to find here in the Feywild. And we asked him where it was, and he said he couldn't tell us where it was because the person he works for would kill him. But he did give us a hint saying that it is hidden, that we're somewhere we will never find it, meaning that it isn't just given away. Still in the room. Durian, seeing only two things in the room that could possibly hide it, a pedestal and a chest upon said pedestal, moves the chest aside, looks under the pedestal, and finds the sword almost immediately, meaning that at that point, Durian wasn't that upset with the guy anymore. He was, kind of fine with it. Eventually, he, takes off the armor. He gives it back to us, and we debate killing him for a little bit, and we decide not to, and we, reluctantly bring him with us. There's a chest, and inside the chest was a small little trinket of the obelisk in the starting room of this dungeon, where each of the four walls in that room led to a different part of this dungeon that we had to get through, each beginning with a puzzle and a little like riddle that we would have to solve. We bring it back to the room, and we had to solve a puzzle with the riddle that said, "The beginning and ends of shadow lie between the light and darkness and may be infinitely diminished and infinitely increased. Shadow is the means by which bodies display their form." Note that one of the faces, this obelisk has faces on it, very creepy, is shining light, lighting up the whole room with four torches. We've done this like 3 times at this point, so we kind of figured that darkness is the whole key, and so we turn on all the torches, cover the guy's face so there's no light shining through, use the obelisk to cast a shadow on the last wall in the room, and open up the pathway to what is pretty much freedom. There was a slope that was like pretty steep and slick with like the water, and it was a perilous climb. There was a knotted rope to help us. It was one last little dig at us. There was a constitution check that we each have to make as we're climbing up, and Durian, the character I play, just so happened to roll 1 and fail, which is pretty sad for a barbarian, and I got some points of exhaustion, 2 to be exact. But as we got to the top, we breathed in that sweet, sweet fresh air of not being in a stingy dungeon, and we all got what was pretty much a long rest, which was very appreciated. I only got 1 point of exhaustion at this because the long rest took away the other one. And we were met with what was pretty much a celebration. There was a bunch of, creatures of many sorts and sights dancing in the streets, having general merriment, drinking, eating, talking, festivities and such. But this is the Feywild, and if you know much about the Feywild, that's not exactly a good thing. We went through to what was essentially a small town. We were taking in the sights. We took a quick scan of the crowd, and we saw that there was basically thirds of the population. There was the third that bet on us in this deathmatch dungeon where everyone was viewing us to win, and we won, and so they were very happy. There was another third that just frankly didn't care at all. They're very indifferent to us, and there was the last third that wasn't so happy with us because they bet against us and won, so they lost all their money or whatever else they bet. We conversed quickly, amongst ourselves because Jakra and Peter were, they're from here and they kind of know more than Desperado and Durian, the Outlanders, at this point. And we decided that we need to find this, amulet we were tasked to find the location of, and we're trying to find Kevin, so we went ahead and talked to the townsfolk. At this point, then, the Dungeon Master split each of us up into a separate room to talk to us, where only the player and him would be able to hear what was going on, unless you're a viewer, then you hear everything. And we're pretty much given the chance to be tricked. Each of us got our own little guy talking to us, asking us some, fairly lukewarm questions. And then right at the end there, he asked us each a little funny question that, if answered improperly, would have been pretty bad. Jakra, who is from the Feywild and a monk who has a no-nonsense attitude, pretty much just said, he was asked if, after a long conversation about the demon striking him from behind, asked him if he wanted eyes in the back of his head, and he said, "I'm happy with where they are," debuffing this buffoon from trying to stick his eyes in the back of his head, quite literal. Peter struck up a conversation with a guy who was asking him to relax and sit for a spell, and Peter did, and he gave away his chromatic orb spell, and as a sorcerer that's pretty dooming because you only have so many that you can prepare. But he did steal some gold from him. 4 to 5 gold. So, that's a plus. Desperado, the paladin, who has a spice bag, was, he went to the kitchens to go find some food, and a gnome that was preparing food in the kitchen asked him to help. Asked him if he could give him a hand. And Desperado, being a, good-natured paladin, not too smart, said, yeah, sure, and he shook him with his right hand, his non-dominant hand, and it popped right off. And now he just has a stump, which was, that was, pretty bad. I was approached by a mushroom, a guy who spoke in my head, asking me about my opinions on the queen, if I liked her or not, and I told him I didn't, and said, oh, I know a guy that's close to the queen, do you want me to give him a piece of your mind? And I wasn't quite sure if this was going to be like a alliance thing that was going on, or if it was like a trick. I kind of said maybe, and we left it up to a die roll. And the dice determined that, nah. My answer was no, and the drumstring guy said, drat, and walked away. We come together, find out what happened to each of us, saw, the missing hand. That was, pretty scary. But we also saw in a circle of finely woven baskets a very familiar monk, Silverado, one of the heroes of the Power Trio from a couple years back, and Desperado's cousin, who he was trying to find, tries to talk to him and find out what he's doing here. Why is he here? Why is he weaving baskets? Why hasn't he tried to run away, or what's going on? And we learned through a pretty long conversation that Silverado doesn't seem to have much of his memory. He doesn't seem to remember what he's doing, but he seems pretty content to weave baskets. He knows that he was fighting like a squid-like entity underwater with Doomsmere. So he just push over, but he doesn't know how he got here, and why he's still here. But he just kind of is just hanging out. Desperado gives him some of his own written memoirs from the man himself. And he, flipping through the pages, getting some, small bits of memory, questioning if he really is Silverado. And we convinced him that, hey, you don't have to decide right now, but if you want to leave this place when we're going, you can come with. We'd like it if you would. And he said maybe, pretty much. Jakra, meets up with his friend Elias, who is also a character from the last campaign, played by the same person who's talking to him. And we were told, and Desperado and Durian were told to find this guy for information on where the amulet they were sent here to go look for. And he said that he would tell us where it was if we did him a favor, typical Feywild stuff, and asked us to steal a book about necromancy from the Feywild Queen, Lady Jude, her private library, guarded by some dire dogs, wolves, some monstrosity, I'm sure. And we said, okay, we'll do that, but we'll get his hand back first. And then we ended the session there. Thank you for joining the recap for session 15, campaign 4. See you next time.